great to be here in a room full of beautiful people. Nothing like it. So thanks for coming tonight. Yeah, let me just start with my story a little bit. My husband and I were in the Evangelical Church, the conservative, non-affirming church for 20-some years. We didn't know it was non-affirming because nobody ever talked about LGBT. Invisible. We were in the church for all those years and raised our 5 kids there and just understood the whole culture there, and were part of it and taught and everything else. And then our daughter Annie came out as queer, and suddenly everything just fell apart in our relation to our community. And right when she told me, one of the things that I knew right in that moment was we'd never be the same in the church again. And I found that an incredible indictment, that here we've spent all these years invested in a family, a church family, with unconditional love, a God of unconditional love. Suddenly, there's a condition, and we transgressed it. We were told that this is a sin, and we can't accept it. I said, no, when we got our head around it. No, you're the ones who are sinning here. We're taking our daughter, and we're out of here. But it sent us on a journey of discovery where we had to really kind of break this down. Why is this a deal breaker? Why is, people do all kinds of things here, even if you think it's wrong. Why is it the thing that's wrong? And as we began to study and learn, as many of you have been there, it all started to fall apart. The whole thing's like, making a little house out in the backyard full of paper, and a little bit of rain comes and it all just falls apart. It's exactly what it was like. And when Annie, so we didn't even blip on a radar of acceptance of her, but we did have to deconstruct our theology. And then months after she came out, we accepted and the whole thing, she said to me, "Are you sure you will never reject me, you and Dad? Are you sure?" She asked like 4 times, which broke my heart. I thought, yes, I'm sure, but why are you asking? Why? I thought this was done. And then she told me about friends who had been abused in their families. One friend of hers, Allison, whose mother threw her down the stairs and threw dishes at her when she came out, which is a shock. And in that story, really, is where Freed Hearts was born, because that's when I knew this is a real problem. My girl's fine, we got her, but there are a lot of people out there who are being abused. That's when it really came home to me. Also, a year after Annie came out, or a year or 2 years, I keep mixing that up. I think it was 2 years. Our younger daughter came out too. So we're in 2 for 5. And it's okay, I always assure audiences it's really fine because we love the straight ones too. But, Annie had to cut through our theology with a machete and help us understand. She gave us recommendations on who to read and all that, and answered my questions, and told me she was going to an Episcopalian church, which is affirming, and I thought, oh, they're not even Christian, at that point. I know. Oh, that poor girl that I was. Excuse me. So we had to clear away all that debris. And then Hannah, like any of you who have a younger sibling know, they get away with everything. She's like, oh, me too. She walks in that clearing. Like, okay, you too. So anyway, and I was I say some of this in the TED Talks. I won't talk about how I became an ally, but it was in that moment of seeing her, of seeing those stories she was telling me about. And then I went and visited her in New York. She graduated from her very small Christian college, uni, where they have no gay people, just so you know. Yeah, because they can't, so they're all underground. She left there, she went to New York, and she called me like 6 months later, and she said, I finally got away from all the theological sameness. Isn't that a great concept? All that sameness of the evangelical world that she'd grown up in, and her college and everything else. And now she's in New York, which is awesome. They had a place. They have a place in the Village, an area of New York called Christopher Street and then Gay Street. And on Gay Street now, it's been there for decades. Now it has bisexual, lesbian, transgender, agender, in all the different colors. It was the greatest when I found out they had done that on Gay Street. So you're represented there. Anyway, so she called me from New York, and she said to me, I'm more at peace. I'm dating women now. I've stopped resisting, and I'm more at peace with God than I've ever been. That's the end game. That was all I needed to know. Peace with God is what we all are here doing this whole Christian thing for. And I was at complete peace. What was the name? Oh, and so they were going to do something. We took a little trip to Washington, D.C., and they were voting on this thing about marriage between one man and one woman. It was going to become law of the land, hard to change and all that. And there were protests there were people in support of that. And then the next day, people in protesting, that's the LGBTQ community. And we had gone over it, and it was all in front of the Supreme Court building, which is where they make all the decisions for legal stuff. And we had gone just as tourists, and we noticed this all going on. We didn't know that. And I saw these people. They looked a lot like you, in all shapes and sizes and colors and everything. And they were the most beautiful, peaceful, joyful, loving people anywhere. And I thought, how in the world does a community who is supposed to be the love of God have any way to say that you can't be who you are to these people? It was just shocking. So I wrote my first blog post. I like to say God tricked me into it because, I didn't know how I'd ever start Free Hearts. But God did. And I wrote this blog post just saying exactly what I said to you and affirming this group of people and saying, how dare we try to tell them who they can't be. Anyway, I got a lot of people coming out of the woodwork just saying, my daughter came out, I don't know what to do. Or I came out to my family, now my mother won't stop crying. And various things like that. And I just kept loving them. Jesus talked about that. Said it's kind of really the only important thing is to love each other. So I just kept loving them. And lo and behold, love works. It actually is a good idea. And so I just kept growing from there. And now my little blog has grown into huge numbers of followers and local regional groups and this big online support group and the TED Talk, which was the most fun I think I've ever had in a long, long, long time. So anyway, that's me and that's my story. And we've become full-time big advocates and allies, my husband and I. We've lost family members. My oldest sister, who loves everybody with the love of Jesus, can't be around us because of our daughter. I know. And her daughter, who is, the same as her except with less compassion, just has nothing good to say. And it's just a heartbreak. So for those of you who have been on the receiving end of that, I just had a tiny taste, and it is bitter. And I really am sorry for what you've had to go through. I wish I could change it for you and for them. But if you're standing and facing every day, I'm honored to be here with you. So thanks for being here. So how many of you have been on the receiving end of how sinful you are? You're not really a good Christian, maybe not a Christian at all, and various things like that. You don't belong in the community, all of that. Okay, I want to deconstruct that for you a little bit, okay, for us here. So I'm going to use this lovely whiteboard that happens to be here. All right. It works. Just double checking. So let's just talk about, people have maybe told you you're not a good Christian, if you're even a Christian. Who knows? That's what my niece told me. I'm not even sure if you're really a Christian. Okay, whatever. So I'd like to hear from you. You just tell me things that you've been told it takes to be a good Christian? And I'll make a little list. We'll call this the do list. What do you need to do to be a good Christian?
They have to be celibate.
Be celibate. You shout them out. That's a celibate.
That's just celibate.
What else?
Love one another.
Just shout them out.
Love
Keep
one
fighting.
another.
What?
Just keep fighting.
Keep fighting. Okay. What else?
Pray, resist it.
Resist it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That goes away.
You're not really gay.
Pray. You're not really gay? So she said, yeah.
It's a phase.
It's a phase. A 40-year phase.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are a lot of things. Do pray.
You're an abomination.
Yeah. Go follow the 10 Commandments. Follow the church rules. Give, tithe. I'm sure you tithe. Come to church no matter, even if, you know, unless you're dead, come to church. And this list can go on and on and on and on. You get that maybe it can go on and on?
Yeah.
Wear only dresses, wear head coverings, blah, 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 right? Depending on the century, it's a whole different list. Okay, now we'll have a don't list. Tell me what don't do.
Hate.
Don't hate. Don't be gay. Don't approve of those who do. Nothing? You got nothing for me?
Love the sinner, not the sin.
Love the sinner, don't love the sin.
Don't lie.
Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't go with girls that do, whatever that is. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't go with girls that do, whatever. Okay, sorry, that's a very old, stupid saying.
Don't question authority.
Don't question authority, if they're wearing pants especially.
Yes.
That's the authority worth listening to. What else? A couple more things. Okay.
Don't sleep at church? Nobody does that at my church.
Okay. Now this is a pretty good situation here. Every church has it, don't they? They have their do don't list. Every century has its own version of this. Now, if we do a little magic here and draw a little thing around it. What have we got? Tree. What kind of tree? Does that sound like any tree you've heard of? Maybe in Genesis.
Knowledge of good and evil.
The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's right. Okay, let's write that here. Because see, that's good and that's evil. Do the good, don't do the evil. That's the tree of knowledge right there. Now, what does Genesis say about that tree? Don't eat from it. Don't eat from it. Right? All right. Okay. Well then, let's move on over here. And we've got another tree in that same garden. What is that?
Life.
Tree of life. Yeah. And who did John say is the way, the truth, and the life? Jesus. Okay, so this is the tree of life. All right. What did God say about that tree?
Ate from it.
Eat from. That's right. So what God is telling us, what that story is telling us, that God is telling us, is that these decisions of right and wrong, we shouldn't be focused on who's right and who's wrong, and what's right and what's wrong, and our knowledge of what's right and what's wrong. So I'm not supposed to be walking around and saying, well, I think you're good on this thing, but I think you're messed up over there, and that's a sin, and whatever. That's not our job with each other. We're supposed to be over here on the tree of life. When you have this, you have rules. When you have this, you have a relationship. So have you ever had the experience with God, with the Holy Spirit, where you're doing something and you hear the Holy Spirit say, no, honey, don't do that. Have you ever had that? Yeah, I have. Sometimes she's had to tell me a few times. But I get the idea. But it's based on relationship. It's based on love. It's not based on you've broken this boundary, you're out of here. See? And that's what we're called to be over here. This is rules, this is relationship, this is law, this is love, this is principles, this is people. Now, if you get a hold of that, it will change everything in your understanding. Because all the ways that the church leadership have messed us up, have messed up the church authorities, has been because they're imposing rules instead of fostering relationship. Anybody been on the receiving end of rules where there should have been relationship? Yeah, that's your problem right there. That's the problem right there. I could do a whole week conference on all the ramifications of just that story from Genesis and how it's been messed up and how to get it back on track is to actually do what Jesus said, and that's love God and love others, and be kind and feed people and serve people and be in relationship with people. And all the other stuff takes care of itself. Have you ever had somebody you love say, excuse me, say something in the relationship, like kind of give you insight on something that maybe helped you somewhere you may have been off track, but the relationship is where they came from and you received it well? Does it fit? Yeah, that's over here. Okay. So I'd like to, what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to have some of your questions, because there are a lot of questions out there, things that you've had to deal with and face, and I'd love to be able to engage with you about that. And also, if you have any more questions about that, that I can help illuminate what the depth of that is. The churches that I find that are affirming, like your church, focus on this. Yeah. The churches that you probably came from, and I came from, focus on that. So the applications are endless on this. So let me open it up right now and just kind of ask what kind of questions you have. I've stunned you into silence.
A comment rather than a question so much is that I'd approach that as a distinction between church and faith.
Yes.
My faith
That's
is
right.
on the right.
Right.
A lot of the churches are on the left, and that's the way I've coped with it. I'm Catholic.
Yeah.
And so as far as I'm concerned, my faith is there on the right.
Yes.
And there are some people, not all of them, there's plenty of people in the pews that are actually on the right.
Yes.
But there's the hierarchy is still on the
Yes.
left, and so I resolve that by saying that's their problem, not my problem.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. That's true. Totally true. What questions might you have? Yes.
I guess from my perspective, growing up in a conservative church is how do I undo all that's been kind of like you've internalized so much stuff. How do you, I don't know it's a process which I'm going through, but just undoing the rules and the, you know, the shame and the way that you see yourself and it's that process of undoing which I guess is lifelong, but.
Yes. The thing is it is a process. I was going to say my book, True Colors. So you mentioned my books. I have a book called True Colors that really gets down deep on those things and helps really deconstruct and reconstruct your relationships with people, with God, with yourself, because it'll really help you. But that's not all I have to say. The other thing I have to say is to start a process with God. Are you okay to talk to God? Or
Yeah.
Okay. Then to start, I don't want to assume that because a lot of people are like, is to say to God, I want to know what's you and what's not you. Because much of the church, all of the church over on the left, is not God. God did not author that. And so begin a category, a list of what's God and what's not God. And anything that makes you feel shame or inadequate or unloved or unworthy is not God. God never does that. And I've had somebody said to me, you know, well, God always corrects us, and it doesn't always feel good when God loves us, but God corrects us. I'm like, actually it does. It does feel good. It feels like life to me. I never feel shamed when God corrects me. I maybe feel like embarrassed. Oh no, I didn't realize I was doing that. But I never feel ashamed. And so to begin to separate that out and look for the difference and journal that can really help. And when you have a random thought that feels bad, pull it out. The more that you can see it and name it and pull it out, the freer you are from it. So, but I just press into God and ask for clarity. And then community. I'm a big, big believer in community. We're designed for community. We need community. And be around people. Maybe you know, have friends you can talk to about that. But the darkness, where we have to take those things in ourselves alone and face them like in a dark room with no door, that's the toxic part. And so to be, I don't know, a while back, women could, or anybody couldn't talk about being molested because of the shame on them for sexual abuse against them. And now we're in a different place where people are able to say, no, my sexual abuse was not my shame. It's the abuser's shame. And that brings a lot of healing and freedom just to talk about it. So to acknowledge the spiritual abuse against you and name it can help free you from it. God is not the author of that. And it can really be intertwined and has to be teased apart. It's like combing long hair that's in a mess. You have to just keep doing it. But when I first started this work, and I was, after the blog started, and I kept, and all these people would come to me, and I just kept loving them, and I kept saying, God, don't let me lead anybody astray. But where did that come from? It came from the church. Why is that the big concern? What do you mean, don't lead anybody astray? The only people I hear Jesus saying anything like that to is religious leaders who are rejecting people. That's not what I was doing. But the prayer we should be conditioning ourselves to, or conditioning the church to, is, God, let me love well. And so I say that to say, and then soon, I felt like God kept smiling at me every time I said, don't lead anybody astray. Like, yeah, you're not. You're doing exactly what I told you. And so you can have that ongoing thing with God too, to say, okay, I'm feeling shamed, I need you to help me here. Because it is never from God. Does that help?
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you.
Good, you're welcome. Who else has anything?
I don't know whether you see it in the media, I don't want to open a can of worms here, but Israel Folau and comments, money, the whole lot, and I, with all my heart, put out to the Lord to counteract what he's doing, and I pray for those young people that don't have an identity and don't feel that they are loved, that they are loved and they are wanted. So that's where a lot of my prayers are at the moment. But what I can't grapple with is a person that says that they are Christian, following this, following that, being so hypocritical, and like you said, you know, the do's and don'ts of the church, blah, blah, blah. But a man that is a multi-millionaire asking for public funds for whatever purpose, legal matters, whatever. I don't know whether you may have seen it or whatever, but you know, where's his heart? You know,
It's in the wrong place.
Becky said a very good thing, you know, I have no pride because Jesus is inside. I do not see 1 ounce of love, faith, or Christianity in that man.
I agree, 100%.
And the damage he can do.
Yes. So when you are deciding what's right and what's wrong, over here, this supports a paradigm of power,
Mm.
a religious power structure.
Mm.
That he is the epitome, he encapsulates. It's white supremacists over here, sexism, misogyny, racism is all on this, list of what's acceptable and what's unacceptable, which really boils down to what supports the power structure and what doesn't. So, let me try to give you a little example of this. This is another thing I do, like, that's the two trees, I have something called a two list. Let me just briefly tell you what it is. That we can make a list of all the things that have happened in Christianity that have been good, plus sign there. They've helped create hospitals, nursing became a profession, hospice, or what do you call it, doula? Anyway, give hospice, palliative care, okay. Orphanages to care for the orphans. A lot of good things have
Schools.
happened. Schools,
Some,
yes.
most
Unis.
good, some not so good.
Yeah, okay. The general idea is a lot of good has come in the name of Jesus. And a lot of bad. Genocide, colonialism, Inquisition, abolition of slavery is over here, and the in slavery over here.
Yeah.
So, this, you see what I mean? All the bad things that have been done in the name of Christianity. Homophobia, keeping women in their, place, way below men.
The
Crusades, yeah. Now, what is in common in the list, the positive list, and what's in common in the negative list?
Control.
Control is in the negative, yes. And let's ask, who do these lists support? Who does this list support?
Gospel values.
Gospel values, and what people does it support?
Marginalized.
The marginalized, the powerless. What people does this support? The powerful, the power structure. So what you're asking is the same thing.
Yeah.
That he is part of the power structure. Anytime, if you're looking at a Bible verse and you're trying to say, is this interpretation correct or not? Say, who is it supporting? Jesus, every single time, he sided with the marginalized. Every time. And he always spoke truth to the power of the religious leaders and the civil authorities. And so, does that make sense to kind of, when you look at Israel Palau, he is right there in that power structure. He's got all the privilege in the world. He doesn't give a rip about LGBTQ people. He gives a rip about the power structure.
And himself.
And himself, completely himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and you just throw up your hands and say, is there no justice? I know, I do that daily.
But part of me holds out the fact that, the Lord brings things to light to
Yeah.
get solved.
Yeah,
And I know, shit's hitting the fan with him saying what he's
Yes.
saying. But when the dust settles, something will happen.
mhm,
Because the Lord always
yeah,
will bring something to light and resolve it.
good,
And
I'm-
have him sit here
yeah,
and get educated
yeah,
about people.
yeah,
Not just words, about people.
Yeah.
And that's love.
yes, yes.
Mm.
I know, I'm holding out for that, the good will prevail
Yeah.
in our political system in America. It's been a long 6 years, or how many has it been, 3 years? Oh my gosh, it just feels like 6. Yeah, so we'll see what happens if he gets in for another 4, but I know, please, I groan inwardly every time I think of it.
Sadly, it's the American evangelicals that put him there.
I know,
Yeah.
and it's the whole power structure. Anyway, I don't know how far down this track we want to go, but that's,
Well, we're still in biblical times, right? So,
right.
Pharisees on the left, Romans on the right, okay?
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
and they were constantly attacking Christ, but we know Jesus won.
Yeah.
We know Jesus won.
Yeah.
So, don't, and I think where I'm seeing a shift now is there's a narrative that is changing the voices of the LGBTI people of
Yes.
faith.
Yes.
Because the Christian left, well, the conservative Christians
Yeah.
are using the power of testimony now.
Yeah.
You know, so ex-gay therapy and all of that has been illegal, so now they're using the power of testimony, which means that the LGBTIQ faith community must speak.
Yes.
And if we do, we will
Yes.
change the narrative.
Yes.
And one of the things that I want to encourage you with is that while this side is talking about what Jesus will and won't, and the middle is talking about, I love you, but Jesus doesn't love your sin, and we start talking about, well, this is what Jesus did for me, guess what? We're all talking about Jesus now.
Yeah.
And we now have a common denominator and that things can start to move forward with. So, yeah, we might have to put up with a few Pharisees, Jesus did too, you know, but think about the fact that we're still in biblical times. Like, we're still rolling, you know, and so I think there's a lot of hope in seeing, like you said, that God brings things to the light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
That's our hope. Yeah, and we're called to be in community and keep speaking in community. That's what I love about this tree. Everything we do is supposed to be in community. And, you know, we can grow and learn and even be corrected and be directed and mature and all those things in community, in loving community, inclusive community. Not rules-based, you know, cross the line and you're out.
yeah. We say, you haven't been rejected, you've just been redirected.
Yeah, good. I like that, yeah. Because I thought when we started this, and I knew I'd lose my friends, I knew that. And I thought it would bother me, and it just doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't, you know. I'm sorry for my sister, I'm sad for her, and that we don't have that. But otherwise, I have found new community, which I know a lot of you have the same. You found new community that's better than you ever could have imagined in the old paradigm. So, you know, we weren't rejected, we were redirected. That's right. Who else has something?
Do you have any tips for, like, we know about the churches that are very negative and not affirming, but what about moderate churches? They're not doing much, but they say that we love the sinner, we hate the sin, but we still love you and we'd just rather not talk about it. And
Right.
do you have any tips on how to kind of shift that?
Yeah. The thing is, it depends on where you put your butt. Let me tell you what I mean. They'll say, I love you, but you're a sinner, blah, 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 you're whatever, blah, blah, blah. I love you, but you have to be celibate. I love you, but anything undermine, just forget the I love you part. Because what they really mean is this part. And we need to switch that around. That says, I don't understand LGBT, but I love you. Isn't that all different? I don't know how those Bible verses work, but that's really God's business. You're still a human being. I don't understand, as we heard one grandma say, I don't understand transgender at all, but you're my grandson. Of course I love you. So when the important part now is the important part in both cases is after the but. But I love you. But you're created in the image of God. But hey, I'm not the judge. But of course you're included. Yeah, we don't understand this part, but of course you're included. And if a church can't be in that position, debating theology, they're having the wrong debate. The debate should be, are you loving well, or are you not? And so when you're talking to affirming churches, moderate churches, and you're wanting them to be affirming, that's the conversation to have. Are you loving the community God has put here, or not? And love looks like love. Jesus didn't give us an option called love, I'm going to beat you because I love you. I'm going to throw you out because I love you. That is not from Jesus. It's not from God. It's you're included because I love you. And if I think you're wrong because you're gay, it's not my business to say that. You know, that's at the very best a disputable matter. At least it's something, you know, Paul talked about disputable matters. He said, don't dispute them. That's a good idea. Come on in the house, I don't care. let's not dispute that stupid disagreement we have, because who knows who's right and who's wrong, right? At the very least, that's the most bad you can say about that conversation, is they need to just let it go. Yeah, so if a church can be about loving, if they can have the love after the but, and loving and including and in all levels, and love that feels like love, and love that treats others the way you want to be treated, then they'll be affirming. Anything short of that is just a way to keep their own theology. People say, I love you, bud. People say love the sinner, hate the sin, because it allows them to feel like they're being kind and loving, but not have to actually cost anything. They don't have to examine their theology. They don't have to give up their deeply held religious belief, which is the gift
between tolerance and acceptance.
Yes. Yeah, they still get to tolerate you instead of accept you, which was not a category that's okay. And it's treating somebody like a second-class citizen. Who likes the idea of being a second-class citizen? Nobody. Even the people treating others that way don't want it for themselves, so they shouldn't be doing it for others. That was a long way to say, have a conversation and see what they're willing to do. But pointing out through story how damaging their position is. And I compare it often to racial issues. We went through in America a whole history of treating black people like a second-class citizen, or actually last-class citizen. And they didn't like it. Funny enough, they didn't like it. And it was damaging. And so to treat this community that way is really harmful. And to help people see that, and it's through narrative, through stories, to say, I've done everything there is to do. And I belong here. I need to be able to be a human being on this planet, every bit as equipped as you are.
What practical things do you expect a church to do to prove, to come out as affirming? So when a church says, we accept everybody, no, everybody.
Right.
Like we don't feel we need to make a statement on the LGBTQI plus folk because we are affirming of everybody.
Right.
So why do we have to, if we
Yeah.
say that, then we have to have a statement about this
Right.
and that and all the other people in the community.
So are LGBT people allowed in this church to be in leadership?
The only
Yes or no?
LGBTQ people in the church are quite young,
Right.
so they wouldn't be in leadership, so they haven't had to prove themselves.
Okay, so if LGBT people came, who've been experienced and wanted to be in leadership, would they be allowed to?
Well, at this point, that was a question I asked, and at this point they would say, of course, but they don't have to be tested on that because there is nobody at this point who would put
Bring
themselves
somebody.
forward.
Yeah,
bring someone, yes.
Bring somebody in and try it.
Yeah, so what other, when I had this conversation with the pastor, I got a bit stuck because I didn't know what I wanted her to do. Because she was so firm on, yes, we are so, we
You know what, another thing you could do is say, well, so many people have been hurt by churches, and we need to know who's affirming. We'd love for us to be able to come and have somebody give their testimony about what it feels like to be marginalized by church. Could we arrange that? Could we arrange for an LGBT person to give their testimony here? They give testimonies, right?
Yes, we do. Sorry, I'm looking blank because I'm thinking.
Yeah. I'm sure by the time you'll leave, you'll have it. And so if their money is what their mouth is, then they will say yes to that. If not, then you say, then you're not really serious, are you? Because this really goes deep. And just to kind of say you'll be affirming, but you won't do anything to show it, is cheap. Yeah. And they, not to say that they don't need to say anything about it, doesn't understand the situation. Yeah, so pressing them to understand the situation. Say, I'm so glad about what you're saying, really glad that you say you're affirming everybody. We appreciate that because we're looking for places that are affirming, because it's what Jesus would do.
I guess
We'd
it's
love
like
to
not having
share
to
a
say
story.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But we'd love to, but test it. So we'd love to bring somebody in who can share their story, because you may not realize that churches have been very damaging to the LGBTQ community. Could we arrange that? Yeah, and if no, then you have your answer, and she, right, you said, we'll have to own that, well, we don't, but you do have testimonies, and this is an important one. We'd like to do that. When can we do that? Or call her out that, no, she's not willing. It's easy to be loving to somebody that you don't have to see and talk to and think of, and, you know, right? It's just a theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hope that helped. I hope push on it.
Yeah.
Who else has anything? Yes.
Hello. My question is around what would you recommend in terms of conversation starter or explanation that's a bit, it's not too lengthy to other LGBTQ community for me to introduce faith? Because I found it challenging sometimes. It's like I can wear this badge, but once I have my cross, people frown at me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's almost like when me in my community, like LGBTQ friends, who are non-believer, I don't wanted to start talking about church. They're like, no, we don't do religion here.
Yeah.
I just found it difficult to come in to say this is who I am. But
Yeah.
I can choose one.
Yeah. I prefer myself, if I'm having a conversation like that, to talk about God or even Spirit. For me, you know, maybe even the Holy Spirit, and the personalness of it, because that is something that nobody can say is not true. But as soon as you bring church in, you bring all of this into the conversation. And so it's very hard to come in and say, no, I mean this, not this. They're like, no, I don't want any part of that. And you're bringing, you know, this negative list. You're bringing that whole thing in when you have that conversation. So I always feel like I'm very careful in talking about faith to people who have been so spiritually abused. But they're hurting in that area.
Yeah.
Something important has been damaged for them and taken away from them. But I do it with the personalness. To me, it's the personal relationship with God, with Jesus, that people may be interested in hearing more about. But they don't want to hear about church, in my experience, you know, unless you say, well, I did find this one church where they had that experience of the personal relationship. You know, it's completely safe. That would come later after you've already talked about the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, there's some who used to be believer, then they left the church, but there's some who just never know about Jesus.
Yeah.
That I found. Yeah.
Yes.
There's another community that I felt like I just don't know. I feel I don't have a language as well.
Yes. And I would encourage you to listen to the Holy Spirit for yourself and say, you show me who to talk to, who you've prepared to hear about this. Because if you feel a duty to go and share Jesus with people, but it's coming from you, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but you don't know who's ready and who's not. So if I'll say, show me who you want me to talk to, and then that way that person is prepared to receive what you had to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because, because we don't know that. The Holy Spirit has to guide us if it's going to produce anything beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Susan, I've got a couple of observations. I'm the very proud father of Grace, and it's my first time amongst this wonderful community, so
Awesome.
I'm grateful to be here. A couple of things from observation. One, it takes a lot of courage and strength to be non-mainstream and for everyone, or for the majority of people in this room, you know, I greatly admire your strength and power and determination to be non-mainstream, because it's easy to fall into mainstream. To have the conviction to follow your heart, I admire you all. So that's one observation. The second observation was, earlier in your talk, you talked about your daughter coming out and saying she's queer. And to me, being not part of this community, queer to me is an offensive term. But queer, to me, indicates something not right, when all these people are right. You know, they're loving through their heart. So the term queer to me was offensive.
Yeah, and it in the 70s, the 80s, it was used as an offensive term, and 90s. I mean, it's been used very offensively, but it's been reclaimed by this younger generation.
Yep.
And my daughters use it to say off the gender binary, which means you fit in the male category or the female category, and they're pretty distinct. And my girls are saying, no, you know, sometimes I feel more masculine and feminine, you know what I mean? They appear feminine, but they don't want to be compartmentalized. And I think a lot of people use queer that way.
Okay.
To say but they're reclaiming it, so it's a powerful thing. Instead of being used against them, it's reclaiming power by owning the word again.
Okay, good. So that's my
Yeah.
lack of knowledge of...
No, that's okay, but you still have to be careful using it, because you're a straight white male, and you know,
conservative, mainstream, all the... That's really what I think.
Well, we love you, Steve.
My third observation was really, there can be no greater cause for this community than the hypocrisy of the mainstream churches in what they're doing today.
Yes.
And you put up the tree of knowledge and how they're very driven by rules and regulation, yet the hypocrisy within those churches themselves. And you mentioned about Jesus' Day of Reckoning. I think that's here now.
Yes.
I think these churches and other organisations are paying for the hypocrisy between what they are supposed to represent versus the actions that they actually have undertaken. So I think, you know, power to everyone in the room here, wonderful community, and I'm really glad and privileged to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you're here. Really glad you're in support of your beautiful daughter.
Well, we're on
I
topic.
think they've overplayed their hand, these power structures, and there's coming a day of reckoning, drug addiction or whatever. Yes.
You've just been deceived. Like, I know you mean well, no, you think you're gay, but you've just been deceived.
Yeah.
You don't know what truth is.
You know, my lived experience is inconsistent with what you're saying. In my lived experience, I've tried everything to be straight. And I prayed for X number of years. And God will not make me straight. I know you think I'm deceived, but I think it's just possible that maybe God has something to show you that you haven't seen yet. Would you be willing to ask God, how do you mean? Instead of just defaulting to what you already know. Because everything you would tell me to do, I've done. And it hasn't worked. So, you know, I mean, it's easy to say somebody's deceived because it keeps you from having to do any work at all. But, you know, you can just say that's not consistent with my experience. It doesn't mean they'll change it. But, you know, they're still wrong. I mean, it's still not true for you.
Tell them to go to 18 months of counselling and see if they still feel that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, okay, somebody from the meeting last night, he went through Exodus for 18 months. And I like to say, have you been praying about this for 18 months? Have you gone to counselors who affirm LGBT people and talked to them for 18 months? If you haven't, then I don't really think you can weigh in on this. Yeah. Yes.
Every question you ask sparks a question in me. I'm also a parent of a transgender son. often get offended when people in a conversation will talk about any LGBTQI person and then lump them in the same sentence as mental health issues, drug addiction, prostitute, and I think, oh, how come my kid is placed in this bunch? I'm not sure what, I don't know what it is in me, but I just.
Oh, yeah, because that's not what they are.
Yeah.
It's a completely different
It's
thing.
not a mental health issue and it's not.
No.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Here's the difference between being LGBT, let's say trans because that's what your son is, and all those other things they listed. Okay, here's the deal. Let's say drug addiction as comparison to being trans. If you're drug addicted, you can stop the drugs. Taking drugs is an action, and you can stop it. It may take therapy, it may be hard, it may take meds or whatever it is they do, but it can be stopped. And when it stops, their lives get better. The relationships around them get better. They can keep a job. They can feel, part of the community. And things improve. Your son can't stop being trans. He can deny it and go in the closet, but he cannot not be trans.
And then there'll be a mental health issue.
And then there's a mental health issue. So when you try to stop this behavior, that's when all the trouble happens. That's when the relationships fracture. That's when their life falls apart. When you try to stop it. When you just are that, counter to just taking drugs. When you are trans and you're allowed to be that way, your life gets better. Your relationships improve. Your family comes together. You can keep a job. Do you see the difference? So when you can stop these behaviors and life gets better. When you try to stop this, life gets worse. I don't know why that's not so clear to people. Because they're talking without knowing the people they're talking about and the experience. So, but you can tell them they really don't know what they're talking about. They
I
don't.
feel like I live my life doing that.
I know.
It's
And there's also a way to say, go do your homework. When you're ready, when you've learned some things about it, then talk to me. I can't do your work for you. I can't re-explain this every day of my life.
And that's why this is a community. We don't, there's no explaining.
Yeah. And people will weigh in. I mean, it's amazing. You're pregnant and they come and rub your belly like they have a right to that. It's so strange. People, the liberties they take. But yeah, good for you for supporting your son. You don't have to tell anybody anything. Yes.
We're the parents of a gay son. We also have a gay brother and a gay niece and a transgender nephew.
Yes.
But in our church, which is a conservative evangelical, quite active and lively one up in the northeast of Melbourne, it's homosexuality or transgenderism or whatever is put in the same category as being tempted to be an adulterer.
Or let me tell you about that.
A pedophile.
Right. So pedophiles.
We need to resist.
Right.
And we need to be celibate. And
So,
God will help us.
Okay. 3 different answers for that. First of all, you're mixing that up with people who have sex with children. That's not the same as being LGBT. That's pedophiles. That's a different thing. Okay. And most men who have sex with children are straight, married men. Heterosexual, married men. That's statistically the highest number of people. So you're mixing that up, that category. Helpful Christian friend. It is not the same as adultery either. So let me tell you what this is like. When Ellen came out, when she had that show where she came out in the 90s, feels like 100 years ago. She was on Oprah when her sitcom, her show came on and she was doing that, and she was on Oprah talking about it. And this man in the audience said, well, I'm married and I can't have affairs. I have to be faithful to my wife.
Exactly what
And
they say.
That's that's the same as you. I'm imagining his wife, being his wife.
You're kicking him.
So if we if you didn't have a rule against it, you'd be having affairs. Is that what you're saying? Okay, we'll be talking about that later. Okay. So what he's saying is a rule is keeping him faithful to his wife. Well, that's a problem right there at the outset. But that's not the same as you get to have no wife.
No.
That's like me going out to the homeless people we passed out there and saying, gosh, I really understand this position you're in. I'm so sorry about it, you know. And I just have the one home. I don't have extra homes, which I would really like to have. I just have the one place. And, you know, that's the same. I just have one spouse I have to be faithful to. Yeah, that's not the same as no spouse.
No.
One home is not the same as no home. Do you see what I'm saying?
This is what I've tried to say.
Yeah.
I'm saying it all the time. And
Well,
they,
if they're
they seem to
weighing
come and
in,
turn around now.
if they're weighing in, they get to hear your answer. If they don't want to hear your answer, it's not a conversation, and you can decline to listen. You can say, no, you've spoken, you don't want to hear my response, so we're done. Period. There is a block button on Facebook. There can be a block button in real life where you say, no, we're done. I'm trying to explain my lived experience to you, and you really don't want to know, so don't tell me anything, because you really don't know what you're talking about.
I'm still a part of the church, and I feel as if that's my community. Oh, they're not talking about me. I mean, I've been faithful to him for 50 years.
And not because of
No, I know.
You actually like it.
But yeah, this is the logic, and this is what they're preaching from the pulpit.
Well, I know.
And there's probably young people in the church.
Oh, of course there are.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your role, what you feel the Holy Spirit has you there for. I don't know if you're a silent witness with your rainbow
I'm
scarf.
trying to be.
I don't know if you're the safe person for LGBT people in the church, young people in the church who need you, or what. But, you know, there are answers to these questions, but that doesn't mean they're going to listen.
No.
And you may or may not be in the right place there. Maybe you know you're supposed to be there.
I feel as if I am.
I don't have the patience for it. Yeah.
I feel as if I am.
Well, good.
Kudos to you.
And I'm not personally hurt by it, but I just see the hurt that it's probably
That it is causing.
The last time I did it was the young minister said, well, there is a young gay person in our evening congregation, which we go to the morning one.
Yeah.
And but he's decided he's going to be celibate.
Yeah.
Like Wesley Smith, or Wesley Hill, wasn't it? Wesley Hill.
Yeah. That's the biggest
waiting.
bogus thing.
I know.
So we are designed. Let me talk about celibacy. We are designed for community. You can't love others without others. The biggest command we're given requires community. And you can't really have community if you're going to be celibate. Because you might fall for the wrong person. You might be tempted. You might no longer be above reproach. All those words that are thrown at you. What they're really asking you to be is apart from community. Because you're not safe in community if you're drawn to the person you're not supposed to be drawn to. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
What they're really asking that person to do is go sit in the corner. There's a stool there.
That's right.
We'll bring you some books. You can enjoy it. We'll wave to you from here. We won't get too close, of course, because you might have sex with one of us. But we'll wave to you so you can see us here and what community looks like. But if you don't mind too much, do you? It would help us because we could feel good about it, and we wouldn't have to do a doggone thing. We won't have to change one iota of our understanding, which is very convenient for us.
And we can appear loving.
And we appear loving, and we feel loving to ourselves. That's what the ask is. When you really unpack it for people, it is untenable.
Yes.
Celibacy is a call in the Bible. It's not a default. God did not default 10% of the population to celibacy. I know very few people that are called to celibacy. I do know some asexual people. Maybe that is what that call looks like in real practice. But it's not a default setting. So, but you have your work cut out for you getting non-affirming people to believe it because they don't want to change their theology.
No,
They
that's-
don't want
that's
to change
the
their
norm,
life,
that's
because
what
if
it
they
is.
pull that thread, soon they have, the whole jumper is unraveled. And they're not interested in that. So, yeah, so good luck.
But also the damage it's doing to that person mentally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Because you're giving them an answer that they're supposed to receive as a tenable answer.
Yes.
Like,
God's,
okay,
God's will.
right.
Yes.
But it's not God's will.
no.
Tell them.
Mm.
It's the church's will.
Mm.
It's the theology, it's their theology's understanding.
Mm.
It's their will. It's not God's will.
No.
But you be that grandma, mom, to those kids who need it.
Mm.
You're their voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
But
think
you
know that.
explain to them, anybody you think has been told celibacy, say celibacy does not work.
No,
You're not meant to be called,
no, it's
to
not
decide.
good
So
for
the
man to
majority
be
of your
alone.
time with your husband, you said you've been faithful all this time. The majority of the time with your husband is not sex. It's having dinner, it's talking about the kids, it's going on vacation. What did somebody say? What was that?
Oh, if you say sex, people giggle.
Oh, you know, it's fixing the car, it's getting the petrol, it's like 1% of the time is sex. But you get 0% of the relationship when you're called to celibacy. When you're told you're called to celibacy. You're called by the church to celibacy. And that's what, that's what you can say and help them understand that. So even, it's not the sex part that's the trap, it's the whole relationship they don't get to have now, which is unbiblical.
Yes.
Only bad thing in the creation story is for a person to be alone. That's the only thing God called bad in that story. So the church is saying what church is calling bad, what God called good.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for asking and for being there, and I hope you really reach those kids, that you're there for them. They need you.
A couple of years ago, I was asked by someone, was I practicing homosexual? And it was only when I got home I realised I should have said, no, I'm experienced.
I'm quite good at it now.
I used to just say, no, I've had plenty of practice.
Yes, did you,
Funny.
no, somebody back here, yes.
My question was about the clobber passages and,
Yes.
and the various interpretations and understandings. And I'm trying to work out how to respond when people throw those back at me.
I would send them the link to Freed Hearts and the resources page. We have them all written out there. There's so much to say about it. But in short, the word homosexuality was added to the Bible in 1946. And it did not replace a word that means homosexuality. It replaced a word that means molestation of children and temple prostitution and other sex practices outside of marriage. That's what it replaced. And pedophilia and abusive sex, non-consensual sex, all of which we should denounce. None of those things we should agree with today. Yeah, even the man shall not lie with another man, the original word is man shall not lie with a boy. That's a very different thing. I think we're in agreement here. Yeah. And to muddy it up like that takes away the real power of saying you shouldn't have sex with kids, you shouldn't molest children. Priests and pastors and other married men. We shouldn't be molesting children. And non-consensual, meaning powered and differential sex. If you're the Leviticus 18 talks about the man in the household, all the people he can't have sex with. He's the loose cannon. Don't have sex with your mother-in-law, don't have sex with your sister-in-law, don't have sex with your brother's wife, don't have sex with, on and on, don't have sex with the slave boys, the children, nobody, your wife, don't have sex with anybody else. That's basically Leviticus 18. And we've turned it into two consenting adults of the same gender. It's But anyway, on our resources page, we have answers to all those things that are in depth. They're just very easy to dismantle. But the thing you can say is, do you really want to dismantle this? Or are you just trying to throw an obstacle in the way to loving this community fully? Because if you want it dismantled, I'll send you a link. It's easy. If you're just gonna then say, well, what about this? I'm not playing that game. Yeah. Because that's what is very easy to say. And then it's like whack-a-mole. You know, you answer that, they got that. Yeah.
And I find it not a helpful conversation to have with people.
Right.
In my experience as a mother of a transgender son, it's just not helpful because it goes nowhere. There's so much in the Bible that we could do this with.
Right.
There's so many inconsistencies.
Yes.
It's just not helpful.
Right.
So I focus more on the relationship. My relationship with our son and my relationship with some of the LGBTQI community who are Christian. And I think that's more powerful than going down through the text.
Yes, I agree 100%. Yeah. So it's kind of like, you know, if I answer these questions, is it going to change your mind, or are you just pull on a chain here? Because it is about the relationships, and you know, whatever you think about those passages, does that change what Jesus calls you to do? You're called to love, to lay down your life for these people. You won't even lay down your theology. So, yeah, it's putting the shoe on the other foot. People say, well, what if you're wrong? I'm like, no, what if you're wrong? If I'm wrong, I'm loving people God doesn't want me to love. I'm willing to take that chance, given the main command is to love. If you're wrong, you're condemning people that God said to love. That's a much greater risk, and it's very damaging. Any other things that have been thrown at you that you would like an answer for?
Mine's not really I don't really need an answer for it, but I've never really had anyone have a go at me about my sexuality until earlier this year, which is when I got in touch with Becky. But I grew up in a very strict Christian home, and recently I lost one of my siblings to suicide. And I contacted at that time a pastor from a church that I used to go to as a child on my mother's behalf to get in contact. He got back to me 2.5 years later, and then Mum wasn't interested by that point. Like, she needed him back then. So I was polite and told him she's not interested. And then he called me because I put my phone number in the thing, and we had a conversation. And he questioned me a little bit like, you know, are you married or and I said yes, and didn't say anything about my sexuality. And then the guilt that took over me for not saying that I was married to a woman was huge. And so I told him, and from that point I just got abused for 3 weeks solidly. And I know there is a block button, but I kind of went back with a fair bit, and eventually I, you know, sort of it was finished. But you know, what concerns me is this person is a pastor of a church,
I know.
But also is studying to be a psychologist. So what happens if someone goes in there? Like, what worries me is this person could potentially harm a broader amount of people.
I understand the risk.
I'm waiting for him to graduate, and then I'm going to find out where it is that he's working, and I'll report him. I'll report him to the board. I'll work out where I have to report him to. But it was, I just couldn't believe it. Like, he's wearing one hat. Like, he's wearing his Christian hat when, like, you know, he you can't do those two things together. Like, be a good, you know, psychologist out there helping people who are going to come to you with these, you know, they're struggling with their sexuality, they're struggling with coming out. Like,
good psychology doesn't shame people.
No.
Good psychology meets people where they are, and then helps them to a place they want to be that's right for them. It doesn't throw a lifeline to them and pull them to where you think they should be. And it's everywhere. I mean, it's just everywhere. The abuses from power, people down is everywhere. So I share your heart sickness.
I was blown away though, the fact that what I had gone to him with was not, like, I don't have a problem with my sexuality. But he then, in a way, made me, well, he threw me back to church, which was why I've been going to Melbourne Inclusive Church, but through his ignorance, because I'd been doing my own thing, floating along at home, like, didn't know where, I'd Googled gay church and that sort of thing, but nothing really came up for me. But yeah, it just I didn't go to him for that.
Right.
Yet he felt he had a right to.
Well, he is
say
a white,
something.
I assume white, he is a male,
Yeah.
and so they pretty much have a long reach
Yeah.
into anything that they don't like.
Mm.
That's the culture. No offense to men, but it is the culture that men are conditioned into.
Mm.
And especially pastors, they're kind of stand-ins for God.
Mm.
So no wonder he gets to weigh in on his,
I didn't let him get off scot-free, but I did let him get away with it. Like, I told him exactly what I thought, politely, respectfully, and that we had to agree to disagree. Basically, I did what you said, that don't go into the argument. Like, I did a little bit, but then...
You find out quickly it doesn't work. I know at the beginning, I kept trying to really have these conversations, thinking they might make a difference. Yeah, my husband and my daughter both said, you're not going to win over people who are not interested, who are not willing to look. So I had to learn the hard way, though, through a lot of conversation.
On that point, since my son came out as transgender and I've seen hurtful things on Facebook or social media, I've just scrolled quickly past because things are so hurtful. Now I'm realising that we all need to be reporting people when things come up, not quickly scrolling past. But the 3 little buttons on the side is
That's
the
very
report
good.
button. And
I haven't been doing that.
yeah, just don't scroll past. Hit report.
Yeah.
Susan, one of my questions is what you just sort of spoke to with a lot of conversations. You can go tit for tat, verse for verse out of the Bible, but have you had some breakthroughs? I know we're not going to live in the ideal, we all love each other world, but have you been able to change someone's perspective, or in forums like this, someone's come along and they've had a light bulb moment, or
Only if there's sincerity on their part.
yeah,
Only if they really are wanting to know. And you can find that out pretty quickly by their comeback. Well, what about, then you know they're not interested in learning. If they say, wow, I never, and Facebook is not the place that these things really happen in a powerful way. It's in relationship, it's, and people don't admit they're wrong right on the spot. It's unfortunately the world we live in today. My daughter Annie said, nobody wants to change their mind in front of you. It's true, it's too.
Give away their power.
Yeah, because it gives away their power, that's right.
But have you had any feedback online or something, that someone's come to a forum like this and gone, wow, you really enlightened me and I got educated?
Well, yeah, I mean, people that came in ready to hear learned a whole lot.
Yeah.
And were able to move forward because they were looking for a way forward, but they were stumbling over the interpretation they didn't get on these verses. And so you unpack that for them, put those in their rightful place, and then they move forward and they're grateful for it. But if they're not wanting to move forward, then they don't hear. So yes, there's been a lot. And we have moms every day who write me, and dads too, but more moms. And they're saying, I'm afraid my son's going to hell. Okay, well, blah, 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 deconstruct that a little bit. And they come in the group and they get help, and then they're changed. And they say, I can't believe how much I've changed in a year. And then they're mad at the church that had taught them such bad theology for so long. I do have a book, by the way, I can send you. I didn't write it, but it's called Raising Hell, and it deconstructs hell. So if you're interested, I'll just put an email to you, and then take it or leave it. But that hell is a construct, and our vision of hell is not biblical. I know that comes as a shock if you believe that it's biblical, but it goes verse by verse and through the words, and it really explains it. So if you're offended by it and you don't want it, just delete it. But if you're interested good. Yeah, yes, yes.
Susan, and you probably covered this throughout the evening, but I have not even started telling my conservative friends that I'm gay, a gay Christian now, and I've only just reconciled my sexuality a year ago. How do I even start that conversation? I don't even know if I should or...
Yeah, with your old Christian friends, is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm still in touch with them, I still see them, but I don't tell them.
It depends on what you want.
Yeah.
If you want to maintain relationships and them not know, then don't tell them. If you want to move forward authentically, I don't mean this like you know, this is the wrong way, this is the right way. But if you want to move forward authentically, I mean, you can just be who you are and express who you are and let the friendships fall where they may. You know, it just depends on how much you want to nurse relationships that will break if you tell them. Because a lot of them will break if you tell them. On the other hand, you know, you come out in one fell swoop on Facebook or whatever.
My mom would kill me.
Yeah.
She's like, don't do that.
Yeah. Or, you know, write an email to friends you're concerned about. Well, I want BCC people and explain your situation. It just depends on what you want out of it.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah. Because I remember when Annie came out, she was in college. We were in Texas. She was in California, and we could have proceeded in the church and not said anything. But then who am I?
Yeah.
I'm denying my daughter. I'm not going to do that. So it just depends on your goal. Yeah. But I tell you, losing your friends over this is like cleaning out your closet from the clothes that no longer suit you, and you think you'll miss them, and you don't. Yeah, I really don't miss the friends that left. So, because I've got so many better, it's like then you go on a shopping spree.
Yeah.
You get all these new friends. And friends where I really get to be myself.
Fill up your cart.
Yeah, fill up your cart, man. Order. Confirm order.
And also the more you build up your support network, the more people you have around you that love you, affirm you, bless you. They don't just tolerate you, they celebrate you.
Yes.
All of that, the more you build that support network, the easier it is to tell people who you really are. And it's not about saying, oh, being the victim and thinking, oh my gosh, I have to come out. It's more about when you are ready to invite people in.
Yes.
You're coming from that place of power and strength, knowing who you are, and then you're going to say, well, I choose to invite that person in, and leave it with them. If they can't deal with it, well then what sort of friend are they?
And I really love that, Laura, what you said. And when you have a supportive network, you really give little attention to the ones that fall away. It just doesn't matter. I mean, that's what is great about Facebook. It cleans itself. The friendships clean them, they empty their own trash. That's really, I don't mean the people are trash, but the relationship may be trash now. And it's okay.
How do you navigate that in family settings though?
Yeah.
With like parents who just think it's a phase or something to kind of pass over, or they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Like or they're not interested.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that? Like you can't block parents or
Right. You can't make people talk about something they don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
You have to decide how much you need from them to say, I'd really like to talk about this. I told you 5 years ago I was gay and you're not able to talk about it. That hurts me. I don't know if you know that, but it hurts me that we can't talk about this. I'd really like to. It's the only way I can help you be able to talk about it. I mean, that may be a conversation you want to have. And it may not. I finally, after, 5 years of this or something, I got invited to Christmas. My sister, who had excluded us, sent a thing saying, Christmas will be on the 26th at my house this year. I'm like, you haven't invited me for 5 years, right? But anyway, I went, and I was there. My husband didn't want to go. My daughter didn't want to go. Surprise. And I went, and I was like, all the people were still there, and everybody was still, my niece is still hilarious, and her kids are still doing their thing, whatever, all the people are still there, and I'm like, I don't fit here anymore. I love all of you, but I don't fit here anymore. And that's, I think, where a lot of people come. When your family can't take the journey with you, you want them to, you'd like them to. But if they can't take the journey with you, then you find you're here and they're still there because they wouldn't go. And so the distance you feel is because there's distance. And so it just depends on how much you want to say, I'd really like for you to come here. Would you be willing to have the conversation? And how much you just say, okay, let's have Christmas and we'll just pretend that I'm what you wanted me to be, you know? You can't, I'm trying to say, you can't make them be where they're not or make them willing to go where they're not. But you can express your truth about it. And you can say, if I can't bring my girlfriend, then I'm not coming. Or you can say, okay, I'll come by myself. It's all up to you what you're willing. But what you really, I think what I'm hearing you really ask is, how can I heal that? How can I make them willing to engage with me? And you can't. You can only express your truth to the degree you need to and want to. You can't, you can spend a lot of time trying to figure out the whole paragraph that will make sense, that will make them want to come closer, and that can't happen. They have to be willing. You know what I mean? You can prompt them by saying, this really hurts me and I really would like to talk about it. But they have their own choice in the matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And you have to grieve the loss. A lot of people, when you have to grieve your family, you are not really grieving your real family. You're grieving the family you wish you had and really should have had if our relationships worked. And so you're grieving that as you look at the family that you really have. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I get that there's like control in what like I bring and control in what they give or are ready to receive. But in terms of close quarters, for instance, and living together and that kind of thing, is a physical or even emotional distance encouraged for a time, or is I'm kind of thinking more. I'm very practical thinker.
So that's okay. So you're living at home or with your parents?
No, not currently.
Okay.
But I have a friend that's very much in that situation. But very much the conversations and how to navigate that is really important. But like I've gotten distant and I really value that and encourage that, but I know that's not necessarily what other people need, and I'm not sure if it's
and your friend
just personal or not. She's still living at home, and I think it's more of a emotionally abusive parenting.
Right.
Are they a Christian family?
Yes. Very conservative as well. She's starting to leave the church, but still living at home, and it's very
bad.
Yeah.
Because they want her to go to church. They want her to be who they always thought she was.
Yeah.
And she's not.
Yeah.
And so, so it depends how much she wants to pretend she is who they wanted, and how much she wants to say, I'm not that. I'm not going to church anymore. It's hurtful to me. I don't like it. I'm not going. You know, only she can decide what she's willing to put up with. But when she feels like when they have hooks in her of shame for who she is, and it makes it hard for her to stay truthful to who she is. You know, they hook her with shame, and because she internalizes the shame, she allows those hooks to stay in her instead of taking them out and saying, I'm not gonna have that, I'm not gonna be that. Is she, she's probably dependent on them to a large degree, and so is she underage, like not adult, or
No, she's an adult, but she's still studying and she's not working. So
and she's trying to get through school. So she might even have to just go under the radar until she's done with school. I mean, it's like being a war criminal, and a prisoner of war in a way. You have to decide what you're willing to, how you navigate a system that is essentially toxic. How much does she kind of deny herself while she's getting through school. I mean, there's something very practical about, I'm gonna finish school before I blow the lid off this place. You know, but it's toxic, so she'll need all the more support from without to be able to keep doing that. And some people get to the point of saying, I don't care about the degree, if you're gonna take that away from me, then, you know, so be it. Do you have something to add? Cause I feel like in the, I don't know, like there's this is not a pretty situation, period. Did you have something you wanted to contribute? I mean that in a good way. Were you, like you look distressed about the situation that we're, I don't know, talking about? No. Yeah, it's in no way, I wasn't calling you out, I was calling you in.
Oh,
Yeah.
no,
Because it's a very difficult situation. And I have people all the time writing me saying, I don't know how to navigate this. And how much do you deny who you are to be able to finish school or be able to survive till you're 18? Or, you know, or the other things. It never should have been locked in together that your basic needs depend on you pleasing those who are giving you your basic needs. That's a bad framework to start with.
Does she have that support outside of the home?
She does. She has some really good close friends, but otherwise she withdraws a lot, and so she goes on the internet a lot, and she has a lot of online friends in different countries. So she does have a support network through there, and some friends that she has as well. Yeah, but it's like affecting her a lot.
Yeah. How close is she to being done with school?
She's got like 2 more years.
I have something
That's
to
really
add.
difficult, yeah.
Because you said you're a practical person. Like I think, so one of our family friends, they were a Christian parent and they had their queer kid living with them, and she couldn't afford to move out of home. So unfortunately, like her parents were fighting about her sexuality and whether it was right or wrong all the time, and she could hear them. Unfortunately, she ended up committing suicide after a few years. So one thing the dad said to us was that he wished that he had pushed her to be more financially independent. So maybe that potentially, if she can take a gap year off school and work for a year, support herself, move out of home, if she needs to be out of that toxic environment for her own mental well-being. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It's funny because I had that image of suicide before you even said that it is a toxic environment. You can only have, you know, drink so much toxin before you die. So, yeah,
Well, I can
support
offer
for her would be very helpful.
I can offer some advice, and everybody's journey is different. I didn't come really from a strict religious Christian background, but my dad took 10 years to come round, and I'm one of 4 boys, and I've got a twin sister, so I think it was a to and fro situation where I gave them space, they gave me space, but we always had communication. And I think that was the biggest thing, because Dad would say, okay, if you're gay, why have you got to do this? And I'm like, well, for me, I just feel like I'm taking off the mask. This is who I really am. And time and conversation is the biggest thing. I spent a lot of time with him, one-on-one, and doing a lot of things with him to build that bond. And now things couldn't be better. But I would say, you know, everybody has to gauge where they're at, but have that communication. You're not going to agree, but you can still have that love and that bond of family. Yeah, if you can have the respect and the love. But, you know, there might be a time where if she's not in a good situation, I was dependent on my parents for a while as well, I got out. And a very good suggestion is a gap year. Save some money, go live with friends, you know, study part-time or whatever.
To say to her parents, I really
Yeah.
wanted to finish school.
Yeah.
But you don't realize the things you're saying to me are really dangerous for me. They're hurtful for me. So I've gotta move out of here. You know, so they understand what they're doing. I just think that can be powerful for them to maybe then find some help to change the way they're being. But yeah, these are not easy situations.
She needs a good GP and other people in her family and other support people, and find another faith community that is affirming.
Yeah.
Because that sounds as though that's still important to her.
And you know, mum and dad might have a breakthrough if she does decide to take a break and move out, that they might still support it. You don't know. But you know, you need to pose that conversation. She needs to pose that conversation, and probably not alone. Have someone there as a support person for her if she talks to her parents.
Yes, don't.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't let her
talk
do
to
it
them.
by herself.
Yeah.
It's not safe.
Yeah.
She's lucky to have you.
And give the parents a heads up, because they don't need to be put on the spot. You know, oh, I've got a friend coming around, I need to have a conversation with you both. This is what it's going to be about. And so that they're informed. Because I think, you know, we want to have acceptance, we want to have this, we want to have that, but if we're coming out at the blind side, that's when all the emotion rises up and there's not a respectable conversation.
And maybe you two can exchange numbers so she can have a conversation with you.
Yeah.
To prepare herself to do this, and you. Because, yeah, she doesn't need to be in there like a sitting duck.
It's tough.
I know. Where's Hermione's wand when you need it? Somebody had a hand up over there?
I was just going to say that a lot of the tertiary institutions are doing really good things for LGBTI allies and diversity and inclusion programs and workplaces as well. So there are other support networks, I guess, as well. So it's trying to access those resources.
Yes. There's good work being done. There are good people doing a lot of things that are making a difference. So you're on the front lines of humanity, facing humanity with their inhumanity to others, facing the church, confronting the church with their inhumanity. So it's no wonder they don't like you. They didn't want to be confronted, they were pretty comfortable. And you're being the face of Jesus and saying, you're not accepting us. Yeah, it's a tough gig. You know, we're always surprised they killed Jesus. We should be surprised they took 3 years to do it. Yes.
What my wife neglected to say was that at the church, quite often people come up and sidle up to her and say, oh, I've got some Rainbow family members. They may have come out of the closet, but these people are putting them back in.
Yes.
What can we do to educate these people? How can we help them?
Yes.
These people that actually say that to me are happy with their family members, but they don't really want anyone to know about them.
Yes. Yes.
They're usually grandmothers or mothers. But
yes. Until it turns and everybody will be happy to be supported. It's that is coming.
But don't tell anyone about my daughter.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're in that spot.
Yeah, that's why I feel as if I need to be
Yeah.
there. And I've actually had a situation a couple of years ago where I was on a prayer team and someone came in afterwards for prayer, and she said, I've got a gay son. And I said, so have I. And she said, oh, and she was really happy that she was able to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good work that you're doing there.
Not really, but I'm trying.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And all of you, I know all of you are facing your own, you know, battles and doing your own work to make this world a more loving place.
Can
So
I just
thank
say
you for all that.
about Freed Hearts, which is Susan's site for mainly mothers of gay children. I just joined it yesterday, and I have been reading the little blogs of people telling their stories. And a lot of them are from the States, but I think 1 or 2 from Australia. There's an amazing list of a lot of people out there, and they are getting help from that. So
Yes.
Well done.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we have an online support group for moms, smaller one for dads, because fewer dads are in there. And then we have one for LGBT people. And then that's just the resources group. So we have also the whole Freed Hearts website, which is loaded with resources. So please go on if you haven't. So Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.